Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Elmhurst City Hall. Today is Monday, March 2nd, 2009, and this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. In the absence of Mayor Marcucci, it is my responsibility as City Clerk to call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As clerk, I will now call the roll to establish a quorum. Regan, absent. Gutenkopf.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Shea.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Rose.
Here.
Gow.
Here.
Kipskin.
Here.
Moriarty.
Here.
Nybo.
Here.
Sapaniak.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Lumnicki.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
13 present, 1 absent. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I need a motion to appoint an alderman to preside as Mayor Pro Tem for tonight's meeting. Alderman Mulliner.
I move Susan Rose as our tradition.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Hipskin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None?
I've got a question. This is an election season. Are we saying that Susan Rose is going to sit here?
And act as, the motion is to appoint the longest term alderman as tradition holds, and that would be Susan Rose.
Okay. I don't think we need to go with tradition necessarily. It would seem to me that with 2 people running and probably 2 of the longest aldermen, I would respectfully request that John Gow sit in.
So you are
Making
making
a motion.
You're objecting to the motion
yes.
that's on the floor now.
Yes.
Motion is already voted on. Didn't you hear ayes?
No, I was asking for nays when he interrupted me.
Sounds to me you're going to have to ask them to be reconsidered in order to do that, George.
Have to what?
You're going to have to make a motion to have that approval reconsidered since the...
Okay, I make a motion that the approval be reconsidered.
Second.
Sapaniak, Gutenkopf. Any discussion? Okay, I'm going to call a vote again then. All those in favor of the reconsideration of Alderman Rose to act as Mayor Pro Tem. All those in favor.
Point of order.
Wait.
Just have to do a vote.
Discussion. Point of order, discussion.
Okay. I asked for discussion. No one said anything.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, Alderman.
My only comment is I suspect we're going to get a lot of comments tonight about flooding issues in town. So I think we should try to keep this procedural quibbling as short as possible and vote as our tradition dictates, which is that Alderman Rose serves temporarily as mayor for tonight's meeting.
Okay. So we're back to the reconsideration vote. To reconsider longtime Alderman Rose to act as tonight's Mayor Pro Tem. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Aye. In favor of reconsidering? Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Well, I might have to do a roll call vote.
Thank you. Have to.
Okay. Regan, absent. Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Gow.
I pass.
Okay.
What's that?
Hipskin.
Nay.
Moriarty.
Aye.
Nybo.
No.
Sapaniak,
Aye.
Morley,
Aye.
Lomnicki,
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
I have one absent, one abstention, and 12 ayes.
So that passes with another motion to appoint someone else.
So the motion to reconsider appointing Alderman Rose passes, and now I need a motion to appoint another alderman to serve as mayor pro tem for tonight's meeting. Do I have a motion? Alderman Gutenkopf?
I move to appoint Alderman Gao as mayor pro tem for this evening's proceedings.
Do I have a second? Sapaniak? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Discussion. We have discussion. Point of order, is there discussion of this?
Yeah, we didn't ask for discussion.
Yeah, probably.
More discussion?
It's too late now.
Okay.
Let's just move
I didn't, all right. Okay, without any nays, the motion carries. Alderman Gao, I hand the gavel over to you.
Excuse me.
If the walls tremble or something, you'll have some idea why. Okay. The second order on the agenda is the receipt of written communications and petitions from the public. If anyone has such a petition or a written communication that you want distributed to those on the dais, you would give it to the city clerk at this time, and she'll see to it that we would get it. Anyone have such?
Okay, fine. With technology, we could do something with that, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. Any other communications? Okay. Then we'll move on to the third item on the agenda, which is the public forum. This is the time when anyone in the audience could speak on any topic of interest of interest to the city that you would like to present without any limit at this point. And I would just point out that each speech would be for 3 minutes. That would be a time limit, and it's not transferable to anyone else. You can't combine and say, well, these two people, one person will have 6 minutes because one yields to it. No, we just do it person to person, 3-minute limit. If you make any request as a part of this, there will be no action on your comments at this time. But of course, the city manager is present and all the other aldermen as well. So if we choose to do something in fact about this, why that may happen, but it will not be an action of the council this evening. So with that brief introduction, is anyone here who wants to make a comment? This gentleman over here with the first one with the dark, well, I was pointing to the fellow with the dark jacket. I'm sorry. He was the first one with his hand up. Yes. Would you go to the microphone, sir? There are 2 microphones, one on one side and one on the other. State your name and address, and then your comment.
My name is Sean Laughlin. I live at 436 Park Avenue, pretty much over at the corner of Park where the train tracks disappear underneath the 290. My comment is that since I've moved back here from California in September or August, we've had 3 serious bouts of rain. Hence, we've had 3 serious bouts of flooding in my particular corner of Park Avenue. And I'm just curious, I mean, pardon my ignorance, but I don't know what the city is doing to address our needs at that particular part of Elmhurst. I understand that there might be a valve or something that they can turn on to alleviate the rainwater or the sewers that are backing up into the quarry. And talking with my neighbors in that neighborhood, nobody really has a clear idea as to what is factual, what is possible, what is in movement right now with the city. And I'd just like some information on that.
Okay, sir. Thank you for your comments. Take this gentleman over here on the right.
I'm Paul Eskenazi. I live at 118 Pine Street. I'm here with a number of my neighbors from Pine Street regarding really a similar issue, same issue that this gentleman just spoke about in terms of flooding. On Pine Street, we've experienced serious flooding in the street as well as backing up into our basements in a number of residences on the south half of the block. It's been going on for a number of years. We've lived in Elmhurst for 15 years, and the first time it happened was in 1996, which basically destroyed our finished basement, which we had to tear out everything, and really the basement is basically cannot be finished again because of these events. And it's happened numerous times through the years. However, since last September, it has occurred in our particular house 4 times. I know some of our neighbors it has occurred 3 times, with the most recent event occurring Thursday night, in which we not only experienced a storm sewer backup, but also a sanitary sewer backup. And I'm an architect and construction manager, so I have a little bit of knowledge, probably enough to be dangerous, regarding this subject. But I spoke with Dennis Stryker at Public Works and Kent Johnson today, and have spoken with some of the city officials, and some of our neighbors have spoken with some of the city officials regarding this issue. Essentially, we believe that there's an infrastructure problem with regards to this. In front of our house at 118 Pine, which is about 1/3 of the way up the block from First Street, there is essentially what's created as a detention pond in the street during these events. The water came up onto our lawn, past the sidewalk, and onto our neighbors across the street, and essentially sits there during the rain, and then all at once it releases and drains out within about a 20-minute period, which causes a further exacerbation of the situation, surcharging into everybody's basement even more, bubbling up through the slab. And this last event, we also got sanitary discharge, sewer smell. There was matter that came in back through the drains and in other areas. And we understand that the system's designed on certain criteria. However, for this to occur 3 to 4 times since last September is not acceptable. And it's not acceptable to have our street treated as a detention pond. There should be a way to solve this matter. We look forward to working with the city on this. We want to meet with Public Works and our representatives and anyone else from the City Council to explore what's going on. We understand that it's been ordered to TV the Lions initially, to televise and see if there's any obstructions, but we clearly believe that this has been going on for a number of years and that there is an infrastructure problem and that it needs to be solved. And so we want to meet with the city. We need to have input with them and with Public Works, and we understand that there are costs involved, but it's devaluing our houses as well as creating, we consider, a health hazard when sanitary backs up into our basement. So we believe that the city has to address this problem, and we understand there's budgetary constraints. However, this is impacting a large amount of residents in this neighborhood, as well as it sounds like other neighborhoods as well. But believe me, there's a large contingent from our neighborhood here that is experiencing this over and over again, and we've really reached the boiling point of this matter, and we need to get this situation resolved. And we know there's a process, but we need to begin that process and see it all the way through. Thank you.
Had your hand up before, yes. Sir. The white shirt in the front.
My name is Paul Garino. I live at 836 North Emroy. I am a 40-year resident of Elmhurst, and I don't have any water in my basement, luckily. I'm here. I'm a volunteer at the Field Museum of Natural History. I'm a volunteer in the Harris Loan Foundation, which is an educational part of the Field Museum. I heard Mayor Marcucci speak about the emerald ash borer, and he talked about how when he attended York in 1970, it was in a forest, and now it's in a prairie. I started teaching high school in the 1960s, so I don't know how much older that makes me than the mayor. But anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about. We have two problems in Elmhurst, and at this point there are no chemical controls for these problems. One of them is the emerald ash borer, and the other is the Asian longhorn beetle. At the Field Museum, we do have a display of the Asian longhorn beetle, and we do not have at this point anything on the emerald ash borer, but I've talked to the people in education. I'm trying to get them to get something, and if we get it, I will bring it to Elmhurst. Right now, this case and this chart are going to stay in City Hall for a week, and then the 4 schools in Elmhurst, which are still getting materials from the Field Museum, and I need my glasses for that. Churchville will have it from March 9th until the end of the week. Emmanuel Lutheran from March 16th till the end of the week. Immaculate Conception from March 23rd till the end of the week, and then Visitation from the 30th of March on. So this will be in the 4 schools that currently receive materials from the museum. It's been my experience, I'm dealing with the Japanese beetle, that the people that find it in the neighborhood first are the teenagers and 10 to 12-year-olds, because they're outside and they're doing all kinds of things they're not supposed to be doing, like climbing trees and stuff like that. So getting this in the junior high, I think, is probably the best way we can take care of the emerald ash borer and the Asian longhorn beetle. The recommended treatment is like if a person has a skin cancer on their face, you cut off their whole head. And basically what it says is you find one of these infected trees and you go 400 yards in every direction and cut every other tree down. I mean, that's draconian. So what we have to do is we have to find this thing before it spreads and completely deforest Elmhurst. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. Later, right in front of you.
My name is Kristen Boxell, and I live at 120 Pine Street. I won't go into a great deal because I think Mr. Eskenazi did a wonderful job at explaining our dilemma on Pine Street. I just wanted to talk to you about, I actually want to move. I want to move to 175 Geneva. It's just a few blocks over. And I'm not going to be able to sell my house because of this water situation. And I just feel really, really trapped. I feel that the value of my house has decreased even more in this bad economy, in this bad market. And I really want to reiterate what Paul said about getting the community or getting the city involved to help us find a way to fix this situation. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Good evening. Scott Levin, 393 Arlington Avenue. When I got off the train last Thursday, I walked to my car and walked very gingerly because the water was up to the bottom of the door. I took off my shoes and socks and rolled up my pants and started driving down Arlington. I'm not going to talk about the flooding problem because others will, but there's another problem I want to bring to the council's attention that I think is equally serious. And that is, when I got home, I received calls from 3 residents, one in my neighborhood, one in Bryn Haven, and one on Poplar near Jefferson School. They were asking what was going on, and I did what I think any resident would do. I went to the website and found nothing. I called the city hall, and I called the public works, and they were closed. I called the police non-emergency number, and it was busy. I then went over to Jefferson School area, and I talked to some of the residents, and one of them told me that she had called 911, and that was busy too. This was a bad situation. It could have been a terrible emergency. And I think it's bad enough that if people are calling and our 911 line is busy and people can't get through, that's a problem. Another problem is where residents don't know what's going on. But if this had been a real emergency, if there really was flooding and people needed to know that they had to take steps to move property out of their basement, if there was something worse where we had to advise our residents, that system's not there. The council spoke a couple weeks ago about the need for police departments to communicate with each other. There's a need for this city to communicate with its residents. And when a real emergency arises, I hope there's information on the website. Go to District 205, you can find the schools are closed. When your power's out, you can call ComEd and get an update. It's important for us to be prepared for when that emergency occurs that we can communicate with our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, this gentleman here.
Good evening. My name is Todd Holland. I live at 416 Huntington in the Brinhaven neighborhood, and I'm also here to speak today about the flooding situation. And when I look across at the City Council, I see a bunch of people who I would like to believe are progressive people. My first experience with the flood was in September of this year, so my wife and I, Claire, have since experienced 2 flood events, both of which have backed up our basement with sanitary water. So I decided to educate myself a little bit. I'm a project manager, and what's also troubling is when I hear about public safety and communications type problems. I work for Motorola, and our business is in public safety. It's a core competency. And communications and equipment is what we do. So I understand that part of the business very well. And the flooding situation is new to me, but I fortunately was able to call somebody who's very close to me who's an expert, and that person is my father. My father is a professional civil engineer. He's also a director of public works, former retired, and also retired city administrator. He's also currently an alderman in the city of Kenosha. So I called my father just to get myself a little bit educated on the problem here in Elmhurst. And it's quite emotional to me and troubling because really it's the first time I've ever experienced something that is really quite troubling when you have to experience it and go through it. Because when you have sanitary water that's backing up through your toilet in the basement to the tune of 4 inches and is actually pumping up through the pipes to the tune of 4 inches of depth, it's quite troubling, especially when you see some of the debris, the solids that are coming up, and you understand that there's all kinds of E. coli, bacteria, so on and so forth that are health hazards to our environment and our community. So when I went about educating myself through my father, what I discovered was that there are a couple of different infrastructure and designs that are in communities. One is just a simple sanitary, combined sanitary and stormwater sewer system, which some of the older infrastructure cities like Skokie, so on and so forth have. My understanding through speaking with Mr. Stryker here in the village is that there are split systems. There's a sanitary stormwater system and a sanitary sewer system and a stormwater system. My understanding is that those two are independent and isolated.
Sorry, sir, your time's just about up. Could you just finish your sentence or so, please?
Sure, absolutely. The problem, I think, has been exasperated. I don't know where the funding is going to come from to resolve the problem. I'm in the process of designing my own system to collect and harvest rainwater as some of the new environmental initiatives that are coming forward. And what I'm looking for from the city is trying to understand both how I can participate to try and solve this problem, to be able to collect water, and then what the city is going to do to partner up to help resolve this problem so that the sanitary backups as a priority are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Alderman Gow, I'd like to preface my remarks. I did to you personally before a minute ago, and I'd like to repeat myself. Our community is in debt to you and your wife for the many years of your service here at the council, and we're going to miss you. I'd like to follow up on what Paul said, and I'm not going to repeat everything that you've heard, but to members of council,
Excuse me, sir. I know who you are, but could you state your name and address, please?
I'm Thomas Dietz, and I live at 110 Pine Street in Elmhurst. The problem that Paul was talking about a few minutes ago, I'd like to just talk about the depth of what it's like. The gentleman over here said he had 4 inches of sanitary sewage in his basement. Last Thursday night, Friday morning, I had 2 steps. I think that's about 18 inches. And actually, I've had more than that. And this has been going on for I've been in the neighborhood, in the community for 31 years, and it's been going on, and the council's been, city's been studying it, and there is an infrastructure problem. And the city needs to address it, and they need to make a commitment. I mean, studies are fine, but I think the pedal's to the metal. There needs to be a commitment to start with the city and follow up on it, take what it needs to do to get it done. I want to tell you that my wife and I laid in bed last Thursday. Our furnace went out because the water, and I use the term loosely, water, came up over the burner on our furnace, and it put the furnace out. And so we were laying there in the cold, and the stench from the toilets of my neighbors filtrated through our house all night. We woke up the next morning. Now, I don't know if that's a health hazard, but I got a feeling it might be. And so we'd like that, not like to, we'd like it to stop. I pay taxes. I don't ask much from the city. I ask the government to keep enemies from our shore and the city to keep bad people out of my house. I haven't come here asking you for anything. I don't want your sanitary sewage, and I want you to do whether it's a local thing, whether you make a fix on the street where the pipe comes into my house, whatever it takes, okay? The city needs to make a commitment. I'm not doing something to you. You folks are doing it to us, okay? We're behaving. You're pumping it. I mean, I don't mean you personally, Mr. Gow, but you folks are, I know you wouldn't do it, John, but you folks are pumping sewage in our house. And I mean, if this wasn't, this would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. And what I'd like to just propose one thing, and then I'll leave you somebody else have the microphone, is we would like to have people from Public Works and the city come into my house. Kristen has said a little earlier that she would. Come into my house. We'd like to sit down with you people. We'd like to look into somebody's eyes. We'd like to talk to you about your problem. We don't want to study and what it's going to take to do it. You tell us what you need from the community, okay, and we'll get it for you. And we'll tell you what we want from the community. We'll tell you what we want. And I think if we work together on this, we can put an end to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gentleman in the back. On this side.
Good evening. My name is Tim Holman. I live at 414 Huntington Lane. I'm the neighbor of Todd and Claire. I, too, this past flood, had experienced the same thing Todd had as well. But my concern is for the older people in the community. Last September, I bailed by myself about 4,000 pounds of water out of my basement by tracking it up the back stairs and out into the driveway with one of those 8-gallon type of janitor drums out of my bathtub, and it was also coming through the sewer system. The sewer system in the utility room. Now, in order to save my basement, that's what I had to do. This past flood, I got a call from my wife while I was out shopping during that strong rain, and she was in a panic. I hustled home. I had my 2 children in my car. But again, after that first rain in September, I felt so physically spent and mentally spent. I said, I don't care. But you know what? I do care, and that's why I'm here tonight, to support my neighbors and all the issues that this city is not doing in regards to this, because it's happening too much, guys. We need action. We don't need lip service. We need some action done immediately, if not sooner. Thank you.
The aisle? In the red, yes.
My name is Erin Mindy Bliss. I live at 436 East Huntington Lane, and I just moved here. I chose to move here because of the school system. I moved from California. We love our school. That's why we chose our house. If I had known that since August, we've had 4 incidents in our basement. The day after I brought my daughter home from from the hospital, the biggest flood happened December 26th at our house. Feces was coming up. This last time I called 911 and they told me to call the non-emergency number. They told me I was the 1,000th caller and I asked if I got a prize. And they said no. And I then asked them, how do I make this stop? The water keeps coming out. I have a 2-month-old and I have a 9-year-old, and it's scary when you see what comes out of the bathtub, the toilet, the laundry room. We've had to redo our basement 3 times. 3 times. We've put $15,000 every time. I mean, $5,000 every time we've had to redo it so far. And I love where we live. I love our neighbors, all right here. I love the school. But if I had known what we are going through right now, and my husband is out of town all the time, we would not have moved here at all. Thank you.
Yes, in the red, in the second row.
Hi, my name is Patricia Reginelli, and I live at 129 Pine. I'll try not to repeat what other people have said, but we moved here around 3.5 years ago because we fell in love with Elmhurst, and we wanted to finish our basement, but we got water the first month that we lived there. So we hired a contractor to fix the cracks in the foundation and the fireplace, and the following summer, the city redid our streets and the sewers, and the first big rain after that, we had water coming up the drain in the basement, several inches up the wall, and we were halting the basement remodel until we could figure out what the problem was. Unfortunately, my husband, Dave, couldn't be here tonight, but he's interviewed so many plumbers and waterproofing contractors. He could be in that business. So we decided to go with the overhead sewer system and take advantage of the city's reimbursement program up to the $3,000. So we installed the overhead sewers. Following summer, late summer, the rain came and we still got water. And we had not installed the carpeting in our basement yet, but we thought we've put so much money into our basement, $20,000, let's just keep finding the solution to this water. So we hired a contractor to put drain tile in the outside of the house. And we still gotten water every major rain. We got September, the 2 days after Christmas, and last Thursday. Luckily for us, we didn't get the sewage, we're just getting rainwater, but because the streets are backed up, the backyards are full, the storm drain in the back doesn't work because the streets are full, and it's just got to go somewhere, so it goes in the basement. So we've spent $19,000 less than $3,000 the city has reimbursed us, plus our basement remodel costs. And we'd like to stay in Elmhurst, and it's just a shame. It's just frustrating. And that's all I can say.
Thank you. Gentleman in the back, I think, was next. Standing. Sorry.
My name is Charles Cunningham. I was born in Elmhurst. My parents still live here in Elmhurst. I grew up on 3rd and Willow. I knew Mrs. Tam's family. I grew up with their children. they never had the problems that they've been having there. I live on Pine Street too. I've been there 20 years. I moved in right after that, quote, 100-year flood. Okay, since then I've had water twice, but I've never had the water, you know, not bad. I've got overhead sewers. I have a sump pump. Mine's more of the problem. But to see what these neighbors are going through, like I said, I've been there 20 years. It's gotten worse the last couple of years. Also, when they did do the sewers in Elmhurst on Pine Street, I went out and complained to the city. The drains are too high. The drains are not even at the bottom of the street. We have, my driveway has at least 6 inches of water before it hits the storm drain. We said something when they were doing it, nothing was done. Because you could see, I knew where the water laid, and it's still that problem. But what they've gone through, and this has gotten worse the last few years. Because like I said, I've been there, my neighbors, this is the third set of neighbors that I've had there, and it's just, like I said, it's just gotten worse, and I really feel sorry for them. And we hope you guys can do something, because it's getting worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Slow down in front of you.
I guess I just want to reiterate what Chuck said. My name is Judy Rink. I'm 114 Pine Street. It has been getting worse. We have not had water for 12 years, and yet we have had it 3 times since September, December, and Thursday. So things have changed. It has gotten worse, and something needs to be done about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, on the aisle, white shirt.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Ms. Spencer, Mr. Borchert, Alderman, good evening. Thank you for allowing us to speak this evening. I have 2 completely unrelated issues. The first one, I assure you...
Excuse me, your name, sir?
I'm sorry, Mr. Gow. My name is Kevin O'Reilly, and I reside at 893 Fairfield. I have 2 completely unrelated issues this evening, and I absolutely assure you the first one is simple, and that is, why can I not find the alderman's email addresses on the website? Okay, that's the first issue. The second is as follows, and please forgive me, but I'd like to read a prepared statement. I'm a lifelong resident of Elmhurst, and I own multiple properties in town. Last Thursday evening, my property at 776 Spring Road flooded again. 8 inches of raw sewage occupied my finished basement. Thousands of dollars of damage has occurred, not to mention tremendous inconvenience. Once again, this devastation was caused by a sewer backup. This was the 3rd time in less than 3 years that this very frustrating event has occurred. And I think it's important to note that in the last 10 years that I've owned this property, I never had any problems since 2.5 years ago, which seems to be a reoccurring theme here this evening. I met with Roderick O'Donovan from the City of Elmhurst Department of Public Works on Friday to discuss this issue. He, as you know, is a superintendent of utilities. Although pleasant and cordial, Rod's response did not satisfy my inquiry. Clever, pre-thought responses that included phrases such as 100-year flood and massive flooding were likely thought up by some clever damage control expert or simply resurrected responses from the last flooding occurrence. Incidentally, in 2007, State Farm Insurance removed backup sewer and drain coverage from my policy, citing unfavorable loss history. I have 3 simple questions that I'd like answered in a clear and concise manner. Number 1, why have these issues become worse recently? Number 2, why does this seemingly preventable situation continue to occur? And number 3, what is the City of Elmhurst going to do to alleviate this situation? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I spoke earlier, of course. I'm seeing a real pattern here where people have been here in Elmhurst for all their lives, but they're seeing a recent increase.
I'm sorry, sir. Ordinarily, if you've already spoken, we'll go through and have other people who have not had that opportunity first.
Okay.
No, you
I
have
didn't
one
see
chance.
anybody else's hand
Have
up.
one chance.
I only get one chance. I have to come back some other time?
Yes, sir.
My name's James Joyce. I live on 130 Pine Street. I would just like to reiterate one of the points about the insurance. Some of the neighbors had indicated that they had backup insurance, had got reimbursement for their losses. And my wife and I have been here for 15 years. We didn't even realize this was available, so we applied to State Farm for it. And we were told that due to the problem that the known problem that we have, we would not be eligible for it. So I understand that this issue is something that, it's not a term, 100-year flood. I acknowledge that we've had some record flooding, and I appreciate that the community is going to be looking into the camera work with the local lines, because that's an easy fix. That's something that doesn't cost money, and so we appreciate getting that taken care of as soon as possible. But we also would like to look at the big picture. This is an old community. It's probably going to cost a lot of money, to fix it right, but we want to at least know that it's being looked into, that it's being studied, and that solutions are being presented and assessed. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady in the second row, second seat.
Good evening. My name is Donna Wilbur, and I also live at 117 Pine Street. I just want to quickly add, my husband and I purchased our home in 1996. We purchased it from his family, who bought it in 1967. And 2 years ago, we started a major renovation and just moved back in this past summer, only to encounter the same 3 events that everybody else has had. We love our home. We have lots of memories there. My husband's family has memories there. We both were born in Elmhurst. We're not leaving. But it has been really, really frustrating to have to continually clean out your basement yet again. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us have become experts when it rains on making sure the sewers are clear and running out to the street. And we work really well together, but we're hoping maybe not to spend this much time together when it rains anymore. So we appreciate anything you can do to help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman went to the rear. Yes, sir.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is James Whaley, and I live at 360 Eggleston. And I'm here tonight on behalf of my daughter, Kristen, who was not able to be in attendance, who lives at 763 Indiana. And the theme, I'm afraid, is recurrent. I spoke to several members of the council, and I must admit everyone has a sympathetic ear to the problem. I think everybody here on Pine Street would agree that everyone has a sympathetic ear. The city of Elmhurst has a reputation that is sterling and enviable, and frankly, these situations are an embarrassment to our community. Thursday last, my daughter had 14 inches of sewage in her basement for the 3rd time since last September. I find it hard to believe that a city with the resources that we have, the excellent Public Works Department housed in a state-of-the-art facility on Riverside Drive, that we don't seem to be able to get our arms around this problem and make some strides in improvement. And I continually hear this same recurrent theme that in the last couple of years it's gotten worse. I pose the question, what have we done to our infrastructure within the last couple of years that may have triggered this problem? I've heard stories about sewer relining. My expectation would be that prior to undertaking a project of that scope and complexity, we would camera the sewer system to identify need, identify deficiencies in the system. I pose the question, did we camera it after the work was completed to evaluate the as-built condition? And if not, should we be looking into that? Again, I'm a 32-year resident of Elmhurst, and I have not been affected by these problems, but you know, you watch your child save their pennies to buy a house. They want to live in Elmhurst where they grew up. 3 times in 6 months, 1 to 2 feet of water in the basement, finished basement destroyed, all your furnishings, carpet, furnace, water heater on the curb. I'm sure I'm not telling anybody in this group right here anything they can't validate. Thank you, and we as citizens of Elmhurst certainly hope that our elected officials can bring to bear the resources of the community to identify and remediate these troublesome problems. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Seeing none, the public forum segment of this evening's agenda is now complete. I would want to comment on this just very briefly that the city manager is here, all the aldermen, of course, and I'm sure you can be sure that we are taking in this information and that the proper people will be fully informed of your concerns, and we will do the best we can to respond to that. One of the couple of memories I have early as an alderman was seeing, I was in charge of watching my neighbor's property while they were on vacation, and when we had a serious storm, about the only thing I could do was to go over and see. There was no way to handle it, really, to see the chairs and just about everything floating in the basement of my neighbors. I also have a very clear memory of wading through another neighbor's basement looking for a shut-off valve. So believe me, though I've been very fortunate in my own home not having had water in the basement, or even worse, the raw sewage in the basement, I can well understand the kinds of problems that you're dealing with, as I'm sure can the other members of the dais here.
Can we just find out how you're going to communicate back to us?
Again, I'll invite a comment from City Manager Borchert at this point, but ordinarily, as I said earlier, we wouldn't really comment at this point. Okay, but I understand why you're asking.
Mentioned before, 6 months ago or longer, and we have received no assistance in Bridgehaven all this time. We want to know now how we're going to be responded to and in what time frame. Accountability.
As Mayor Pro Tem Gao reported, the city manager, myself, we've taken notes. Patty Spencer, the clerk, has I think a full list of all of the addresses. I was briefed on the event of this past weekend by the Public Works crews and was already aware of the Pine Street area issue, the Brinhaven area, and the Indiana area. There were sporadic other problems throughout the community. It was, in fact, a stormwater event, rainfall event, that probably exceeded the design capacity of the storm sewer. That doesn't solve the problem. That's just a fact, and we need to understand that. Certainly, the City Council has indicated its desire to alleviate, if not eliminate, the 4 different types of water problems Elmhurst experiences: Salt Creek flooding, stormwater overbank flooding into houses, and then the sanitary sewer backup problems. There's programs that are in play on all those 4 issues. With the addresses we've got, the Public Works and Engineering group, and if Mr. Stryker's group at the plant need to come into play as it relates to lift stations and the capacity of the lift stations, that will be brought in to review the issue, and we'll get back to all of the folks that spoke this evening We'll do our best, I think, within the next 2 weeks to at least make a phone call and provide a status of where the city's review is at, and maybe at least on the Pine Avenue area, I would anticipate probably having a neighborhood meeting, because there's so much of an area issue that would justify some information in that regard. And on the Huntington Lane, that corner of Park, that's where that whole, a major section of the Elmhurst community drains to the north and to the east, and then cuts through some yards. And I think that might be the problem that you're describing, at least the overland stormwater issue. But the sanitary sewers will back up if there's a lot of that, as the architect indicated, I&I stormwater that infiltrates or inflows. So there's a number of issues that could cause the problem. You want the problem resolved, so does the city. Sometimes they can be resolved in a more general way, but I think in all cases, it's best to have private property protection, and the city can provide information on how to do that. And in many cases, the city is financially a partner to that. So we'll get back to you all in the next 2 weeks. There'll be a commitment to at least give you a status, and we'll probably be following up beyond that with more details.
I'd like to propose a couple of neighborhood meetings. I understand that they have an area of concern over there, and there's several neighborhoods, and we have concern over
Yeah.
maybe the city needs a few neighborhood meetings that are in addition to what we have here.
I appreciate your comments, but again, this is the public forum, and we've gone a little further than usual. Ordinarily, it's taking in information from you, and I just want to reassure you again, we hear you, and I used to live on Avon too, by the way. It's my first home in Elmhurst, so I know the area very well. And we have to move on with the agenda now, though. Thank you so much for your comments, and be sure that we have listened, and we are going to move on it. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I look for a motion to approve the contents of the consent agenda. Alderman Brand moves. Alderman Gutenkopf seconds.
Remove. Ask them if they need to remove it.
Does anyone want to remove items from the consent agenda? Alderman Sabaniak.
Thank you, Mayor. Items A and D.
Items A
and D.
And D.
Okay.
Yes.
Item G.
Alderman Mulner on item G. Any other items? Okay.
Now,
So now we are to approve the consent agenda by voice, minus the items A, D, and G. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed, so that passes. Now we go back to deal with the items that have been removed. First is item A.
oh, we have to
Oh, I'm sorry.
approve it.
Okay.
You accepted it.
Now we accept it, now we have to approve. Okay. I look for a motion to approve the consent agenda, minus the items. Alderman Mulder moves, Alderman Bram seconds. Roll call vote?
Yes. Mulliner.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Regan, absent. Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Rose. Okay. Absent. Gow.
Aye.
Hipskin. Absent. Moriarty.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Sapaniak.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Lumnicki.
Aye.
11 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 absent.
So that motion passes, and now we'll go back to the items that have been removed for discussion. First item being item A. George.
Thank you, Mayor. I pulled it basically for some clarification, and on page 14 of the minutes, and item number 9 under other business, I just wanted some clarification here because the way it's written, it appears that I had basically asked about the home rule sales tax. That is not correct. I asked about the home rule sales tax in that discussion versus the proponent of increasing real estate taxes, because that was a spirited discussion where there was a proponent who indicated that we should raise the real estate taxes, to which I disagreed. And in fact, that's tied into that September 2nd tape that's missing from the website. And my understanding now, all the tapes are missing from the website, all the links. And this was supposed to be taken care of 2 weeks ago. So not only is that critical September 2nd meeting link, which was at one time on the website, missing from the website, all of them are gone. In this day and age, it's hard to believe that that would occur. Plus, at the meeting for which these minutes are listed, right after I asked the question, the program ended. And yet, as we can see, there were other items. We've got to have more transparency in presenting this material. These things can't be cut or disappearing, and I would appreciate it if we can have some explanation as to what's happening. This past Monday, we just discussed the budget for MIS. If there are such issues with MIS, I wonder, what's going on with the budget. Do we need some of that money that's in there for these type of things if they're not going to be presented accurately?
Comments?
Could you just repeat? It is the September 2nd tape.
Yes, it is.
And you referred more than.
Right. It was the home rule sales tax discussion versus the proponents of a real estate tax increase, for which the proponents indicated they support the real estate tax increase as they had in the past.
Okay, that can be amended.
Okay, thank you.
To reflect your comments. Yeah, I believe we have to do a roll call vote on this.
There should be a motion to approve it as amended.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve it as amended then? Alderman Gutenkopf and Mulner.
Okay, now call the roll. Gutenkopf. Aye. Mulliner.
Aye.
Regan. Absent. Leader.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Rose. Absent. Gow.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Moriarty.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Sapaniak.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Lomnicki.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
Okay, the motion passes. The next item that was pulled from the agenda is item G. That is a report policy for vacating city right-of-way.
D.
Oh, I'm sorry, D. I'm sorry, I passed by that. Next item is D. Accounts payable February 28, 2009.
Thank you, Mayor. I pulled that basically because we had a wire of $3.5 million for the DEFCON partnership for the garage. And a couple questions. The $3.5 million was given to us as information regarding the agreement, the development agreement, but yet that was what we were told was the price that DEFCON had paid for the property. Did we ever see that contract that had $3.5 million in there? I mean, did we actually look at that contract to see if they, in fact, had an agreement for $3.5 million, and if so, were there any prorations or whatnot in that contract to make sure that we weren't paying a full dollar amount, and also to verify that that dollar amount is correct to begin with? Please.
Yes, we've seen the contract. whether or not the $3.5 million was actually paid out for that closing, I can't tell you. The closing was the day after the council approved the development agreement, so there may be a refund to the city. I'll have to look and see whether or not that's the case. I don't know if Marilyn's not here. I don't know if she knows if there has been a refund or not. But certainly there were, the city paid what the developer, the purchase price of the property by the developer. We've confirmed that that's $3.5 million.
So, but my point is that when he says that, we want a contract or something that somebody from the city looks at and verifies.
Yes, and I've seen that.
Okay,
Yes, I had it weeks before the closing.
Okay, now, let me dovetail that into, this is still a live issue based on 2.06 BB in our ordinances, where there could be a motion to reconsider by anyone on the dais at the next meeting.
That's not correct.
Okay, please correct me.
Robert's Rules of Order provide that a motion to reconsider is not proper when you're dealing with a contract which has been approved and there's been action taken towards furtherance of the obligations under that contract. So in other words, according to our rules that you see in the book, a motion to reconsider would be appropriate, but not in this case because this contract's already been fulfilled, been closed.
Okay, I guess I can accept that, but I would wonder, I have a feeling that it's not a service contract, that it's a construction contract under 65 ILCS 5/8 9-1. And so that goes back to that $20,000 that another, I guess a candidate had filed with the DuPage County as far as the open bidding process. You know, I don't think this is a service contract. I think this is a construction contract, but be that as it may.
We're talking about
you know, on a parking deck.
We haven't signed that contract yet.
Okay.
The contract's in process.
Okay.
For construction.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, no further action on that inquiry seems required. Yes, no?
We need to approve it.
Okay, I look for a motion to approve it then. Accounts payable, yes. Alderman Molnar moves. Alderman Hipskin seconds.
Okay. Mulliner.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Regan, absent. Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Rose, absent. Gao.
Aye.
Moriarty.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Sapaniak.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Lumnicki.
Aye.
12 ayes, 0 nays, 2 absent.
So the motion passes. The last item that was pulled from the agenda is item G, report policy for vacating city right-of-way, Public Works and Buildings Committee.
Read the title.
Okay.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Building Committee that the above described policy on vacating be adopted. Respectfully submitted, Public Works and Buildings Committee, signed by John Gao, Chairman, unsigned by Michael J. Regan, Vice Chairman, signed by Donna Lumnicki and Pat Shea.
Okay, I believe, Alderman Mulder?
A motion. This is your committee.
I invite a motion to approve. This is, yes, Alderman Lumnicki.
Thank you. Do you want to comment or? Second it, thank you.
Make the motion.
I'll make a okay, I make a motion that we accept the contents as read on the report.
Okay, we have a second. Alderman Shea seconds. Now it's in order to discuss this.
Would you like me to start? Thank you. This has been something that our Public Works Committee has been working on for quite some time. We've come to some type of recommendation that would allow future council members to consider when it becomes issues of rights of way. I think the terminology is very good in this, that it states that it would come to the Public Works Committee on a case-by-case situation, that every case would be somewhat unique into itself. However, this would allow for some terminology for the committee to decide whether or not there was a proposed value to that, and that value be appraised by the assessor, and with that starting with a 50% cost share from the EAV. And I believe, like I said, there was quite a bit of discussion on this, and I think there was a nice consensus that we came to terms with the fact that we thought that every case should be taken in consideration, yet the city would have the discretion on whether or not they should charge for that, and if so, using the 50-50 cost share on that property. And I move that we have it accept as read. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alderman Molnar, you were the one.
I don't necessarily have a question about it. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I think this is an excellent report. However, I can't support it. You've heard me say this a number of times every time we talk about rights of way. I believe that the rights of way, if they're non-functioning for the city and there's no purpose in having them for the city, we should be providing those to the adjacent property owners at no cost, because in the long term we're going to benefit from the taxes that are going to be there. I believe that the same thing is true whether it becomes a buildable or it's an unbuildable lot. In fact, I believe that it's a buildable lot. It's going to become more valuable to us because we're going to end up with more taxes. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that I think it's an excellent report, but I cannot support this report.
Thank you. Actually, my views would be, are well known on these vacating city rights of way, and I would agree with what Alderman Mulliner said in terms of his views. But I read this report very carefully, and there is a sentence that says, this policy is designed to provide a framework to evaluate a vacation request, but does not mandate that the committee assign a charge. So I too feel that this is a well-crafted piece, and because of that sentence, I can support this, even though, as I said, my views are very, very similar to Alderman Mulliner. But this seems to say also that each of these cases should be evaluated on the basis of each case by case. But the key is that one sentence, does not mandate that the committee assign a charge. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Gutkopf.
Thank you. My views are pretty much polar opposite of Alderman Mullner's. However, I'm glad that we finally proposing a framework so that we can move on from some of the lengthy discussions we've had about our philosophy regarding right-of-way vacations. And I hope because of that, we'll be able to accept this policy. I don't feel it's strong enough. By proposing essentially a cap on the value that we're going to request people pay for city land at 50% of the equalized assessed value, we are looking at roughly a sixth of the real value of a piece of land, and I find that to be an incredible deal. And what my biggest concern is that we're going to get a land rush, and people in town are going to be running to us wanting this incredibly inexpensive land that we've now potentially capped at such a low price. I really think that we're undervaluing assets that the city has, assets that we should protect and use to the best interest of all the residents of the city. And if that means charging a fair market value for that land so that all people can benefit by the sale of property to one person, then I think we should do it. I'm going to support this policy, even though I don't think it's strong enough, because I think we need to start somewhere. And this is at least a starting point that I hope we can all agree on.
At this point, I'd like to turn the gavel over to Alderman Molnar. Because of the previous discussion, I'm not Alderman Sabaniak, and I'd like to make a comment as I would as Alderman. Then, it took us some time to put this together, and it's not, it's not like reinventing the wheel. It's not set in stone. It has flexibility built into it. I think one of the things we tried to avoid with this is to set some standard, some starting point. As Alderman Lemecki said earlier, we set in the policy here basically from a starting point at 50% of the EAV, but it could end up with a 0 point in terms of cost, except everyone, of course, has to, and that's also clear in the statement, everyone who applies for this will pay the cost that the city incurs in processing this, and sometimes it's more complicated, sometimes it isn't, but there is a cost. Outside of that, these are then additional costs or charges depending upon the circumstances as the statement illustrates. But as you may recall, we needed some markers. We needed some markers so that people wouldn't, as we have had in the past, say, well, how about 5% or 10? And I was someone who said, how about 10 at one point, as you may recall. I mean, we needed some starting point, some reasonable anchors on which to base and continue the discussion, some process. And this is what we came up with, that I think has flexibility that would, if people think it's too high or too low in terms of what is actually proposed to the council, they can amend it, they can change it. Or if they agree with whatever the committee is subsequently in future discussions on rights of way. In other words, it can be modified after the presentation by the committee, and the modification could go to 0 to any place in between. There is flexibility built into it, but at least some clear markers for starting points. That's why we thought that it was a viable point. Also, EAV as opposed to, gee, you're going to have appraisals. Appraisals can be ours and yours and his and so forth, and they can vary considerably on a given piece of property that might favor whoever it is who's putting it forward. That doesn't mean all appraisals are bad, not at all, but we felt that you use EAV as a starting point, at least that takes into account different locales from one right-of-way to another within the city, which would mean, different properties, maybe larger ones over here and smaller ones over there and so on. That's taken into account in the EAV to begin with. So we thought that was at least a more appropriate way to start. Other comments? Oops, excuse me. Alderman Nyberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are a lot of strong personalities on this dais. Some are stronger than others. I probably put myself in that latter category. But this is really a great event tonight, and I think that we should take note of it, and I hope that the press does as well. How many hours has this council spent on this issue? And now we've got a report that's on the consent agenda, which is going to set forth a policy for how to guide the discussion on future issues like this. I just think it's a wonderful illustration of how, notwithstanding our strong personalities and our differences of opinion, we really can work together, and when we put our minds to it, and listen to each other and cooperate with each other and try to understand all the issues and come to some agreement, that it really is possible, even on an issue as divisive as this. So I'm really proud of this. I think the committee did a great job. And I'm not just happy for the committee, but I'm happy for all of us if this does pass unanimously, that we're able to, again, notwithstanding all of our various disagreements and our personalities, find ways to work together. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Other comments? Alderman Stepanian.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to say that I respectfully disagree with Alderman Mulliner. I think when somebody asks for a vacation of property right and puts the property into play, just by the mere fact of asking to go enter into negotiations means there's some value to the property. And property is unique. Property rights are unique. There is no property that should have a zero value. Absolutely none. There's a value to somebody, and certainly to the taxpayers, the value is not zero. We're going to be talking about the budget pretty soon, and we're going to be talking about the shortfalls in the budget. And I do not see how you could turn around and say these assets that the city owns, regardless of how the city acquired them, it's totally irrelevant how the city acquired them, how long the city had them. The point is that that asset can be used as to supplement a parcel of property for which a development can occur, or for which some sort of improvement can occur, which is ultimately going to improve the tax base anyway. The right number is not zero. Just by a fortuitous circumstance of being next to a parcel of property, that person should not, or whomever, that company, should not experience a windfall at the expense of the taxpayers. So I don't agree with any logic that indicates that the ultimate cost is zero. It just defies common sense, fiduciary duty, and it also defies good business. When somebody wants something, there is a value, and I'm not saying not to be fair in the negotiating of that property right, but the important point is it's certainly not zero.
Thank you. Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think you might have to pass the gavel again, because I'd like to ask the chair of this committee a question. I do think it's a good idea that we've got something in writing to start with. But I do question, and if I missed it, I apologize. The EAV at 50% is a starting point. And the reason why I ask, I'd just like a little more information of the discussion that happened during committee, because in my short time on the dais here, I don't believe we've discussed or settled on an amount in a right-of-way conversation that has been close to 50%. My recollection seems to be it's been below 50% and closer to 25%, if not nothing. So my question to the chair of this committee would be, is there a reason why you chose 50%, and can you provide the logic behind it versus, say, 25%, which is kind of where we've ended up in the past? I just want to get a little more information.
Well, if I may comment briefly, and I invite other members of the committee too. One thing that the city has, just one comment, one perspective toward that is that we have programs in the city that are, if you will, 50-50. That, that doesn't quite hit the nail on the head exactly, but you begin by saying, well, it would be half as a starting point. Again, if you look at the list of past actions by previous committees and councils, it's all over the map, from 0 to, I don't know. I, at one point, thought, well, maybe I could find an average, and I really couldn't come up with an average that made any sense as a starting point, because it's sort of like picking a point as an average, but you may not find a single one that ever happened at that particular average. So we had a problem in trying to find a point to start with, and there were other comments here. As I say, there's no magic to this. Alderman Shea, did you have a comment on that further?
Yes, for Alderman Morley, actually, the front page of the policy says the committee also determined that the starting point of any discussions regarding the value proposed would be the 50%. So that's the starting point. Then we take in location, what use it's going to be. It's just a way to start. Because even in our committee, we were split. And we thought this was a good compromise to get something started because of the long, heated discussions that we have. This is a good starting point for us.
Alderman Lomnicki.
Thank you. There's also two issues here. There's the easements and then there's the right-of-ways. I think a couple, if not one particular person that was in the audience several months ago, that was an easement. We haven't addressed that yet. Not to say that's going to be any different, but we're trying to get a starting point here with the vacation. Easements are a little different. Whether they're going to come to the same conclusion, I don't know. But right now, I know one that's coming to my memory was an easement instead of a right-of-way. Again, the 50% was a compromise. It was something that we felt we needed to move the process along, and we needed to get to a point where we could get something on paper. And I commend Alderman Gao. This has been his. I want to say it should be put on his legacy. He was the cheerleader on this. He wanted to get this done before his time was up here with this council. He was very proactive. We tried to discuss this every time we got together and find time for the subject. We enjoyed the process, and I just want to commend Alderman Gao because it's because of his determination that we got, and it may not be perfect, but it's something that I think can show that a committee can come together and make a big decision on something like this and get a starting point for future councils to take into consideration, and I think it's a great thing to have on his legacy for one of his many accomplishments on this council. Thank you.
Other comments? Questions? Moriarty.
Thank you. I agree with this and fully support this policy for vacating the rights of way. We have had so many heated conversations and discussions as to what is the value of the property. We're in a landlocked community. Land is considered an asset, but how do you actually put a number or a dollar amount on a parcel of land? Each parcel is so unique. But what I like about this report, it's a framework, it's a guideline, it's a beginning, and it's an excellently written report. I totally support that. So I'd like to say that the Public Works Committee did an excellent job.
Other comments?
As I said, I do support this, but I would like to respond to Alderman Sapaniak's comments. There's nobody up here I respect more than George. But I did say this almost 2 years ago, probably 2.5 years ago, and as I was listening to Alderman Sapaniak saying that there are no cases that justify zero charge, this case came back to me, and I wrote this at the time, and I want to repeat it now, even though, make it clear, I am supporting this amendment, and I certainly concur with Alderman Nybo, and I certainly concur that this is a very difficult situation to deal with, these easements and these right-of-ways, and there are certainly, unquestionably, two sides. But I did say this at the time, and I want to say it again. I said, and I was talking about charging, in effect, for vacationing of easements and right-of-way. Make no mistake, this is a tax. The power to tax is the power to destroy. We here have that power. The power should always be used reluctantly, responsibly, and never indiscriminately. We should be conscious that in acting, we must always be bound by the principles of common decency, common sense, compassion, fairness, and justice as opposed to narrow legality. In the case of the Drosts living on Crockett Street, all of us at this dais are bound in common cause to protect the taxpayer from unnecessary burden. But it was not fair, let alone compassionate, to ask for $89,000 from two elderly people in poor health of modest means to vacate an easement on their own property, which costs the city nothing, and which these property owners had been paying property taxes since buying their house in 1972. We would have been taking a significant amount from the few and giving an insignificant amount to the many, 43,000 divided $2. Aren't the Drosts taxpayers? What about protecting them? And I would also add this. I would add to anybody who is in such a situation, and I would also say to all of us here at the dais and anybody out there watching television, imagine a situation where you are the one that the city council is coming to you and saying, I want 40,000, I want 50,000, I want 60,000. What if you're like the Drosts, elderly people, sick people? Imagine it in this situation where we've all been murdered by the stock market. This is very serious business that we're talking about. I'm not saying flatly that it should be zero, but I am thinking, for example, we have in the second ward, we have all of these people living in North Growey Woods. They're all on city property, every single one of them. There's no sidewalks there. There's no gutters, there's no curbs. They've all extended there. They're all at risk. We have to be very, very careful what we're talking about. This is a dangerous issue. Nevertheless, I'm going to argue like one of my heroes of the 19th century, Henry Clay. Politics is the art of the compromise. Clearly, it's a good report, and I will vote for it. Thank you.
Any other comments? So I think we're ready to vote. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
Lumnicki.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Regan, absent. Gudenkauf.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Gow.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Moriarty.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Sapaniak.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Mulliner.
No.
That's 12 ayes, 0 nays, 1 nay, and 1 absent.
Okay, motion passed. That completes the consent agenda items that were pulled. Now we move to item 5 on the agenda, reports and recommendations of appointed and elected officials. First item A, is Local Government Week presentation by City Clerk Spencer and Museum Clerk Figure.
Okay, I'm going to go to the podium. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gow. As city clerk, and in the absence of Mayor Thomas D. Marcucci, I would like to read a proclamation signed by the mayor declaring Local Government Week in Elmhurst. Whereas Elmhurst was incorporated as a village in 1882 and reincorporated as a city in 1910, and whereas 6 men have served as village president, 15 men have served as mayor, and 2 men have served as city manager since incorporation, and whereas in 1953, Elmhurst approved the city manager form of government, providing Elmhurst with a mayor, a city council, and a city manager, and whereas the city of Elmhurst is committed to responsive and superior governmental services in an environment of respect in order to protect, enhance the quality of those who live, work, and conduct business in our community. Now, therefore, I, Thomas D. Marcucci, Mayor of the City of Elmhurst, do hereby proclaim March 1 through March 7, 2009 as Local Government Week in the City of Elmhurst and urge all citizens to acknowledge the 56 years of City Council, City Manager, form of government. So, thank you, Mayor, wherever you are. Okay. I also would like to have Museum Director Brian Burhager come up and speak to the council on a little bit of our legacy of our local government. So let's welcome Brian. Thank you, Brian.
Come straight from the museum here, so we have the white gloves this evening. Thank you. I was pleased to be invited by City Clerk Spencer to be part of this presentation. As she talked about Local Government Week and about Elmhurst City government in particular, I was struck by the observation that a powerful legacy informs local government here in Elmhurst. This is a legacy that sets the bar for all who are involved in local government today, as well as all of those who will be involved in local government in the future. It sets the bar for elected officials, for appointed officials, and for every city staff member as well. As an employee of the city and as director of the Historical Museum, I feel I have a role in perpetuating this legacy here in Elmhurst. So I've brought with me this evening a tangible part of that legacy to share with all of you. I have here the first minute book of Elmhurst village government. There's more than a grain of truth in the saying that home is where we start from. In a sense, home for Elmhurst city government begins on page 1 of this well-worn leather-bound book. This book holds an account of that first meeting of Elmhurst village government on July 8th, 1882. And it goes on from there to describe how the village created streets, provided for public safety, and attempted to make Elmhurst a healthy community, healthy in body and spirit and mind. What strikes me while reading through the first minute book is how early government, seemingly and perhaps surprisingly, expressed its values through its work as well as through its very existence. Accounts in the book, of course, explain how village government came into existence. They explain various services that were provided here in the 1880s. And those accounts also note a variety of governmental jobs here in Elmhurst at that time. But I'm also left with a strong sense that this village government in 1882 was a form of community empowerment. Reading the accounts of those early meetings, I meet active people, people with motivation, people with skills, and people with confidence. I see a strengthened community, a community that brings together its whole capacity and all of its resources. And I learn about a government that's willing and able to work as a partner with its residents and with other people. The legacy of local government begun on these pages is one of people taking responsibility to face local problems and to make a better life here in Elmhurst. So here in Elmhurst, I sometimes think this is where we started from in terms of local government. It's important and fitting to celebrate Elmhurst local government, to stop for a moment and to reflect on how we got here, where we're headed, and also on what kind of community we want today and in the future. So congratulations to all of you elected officials and to all appointed officials who serve Elmhurst and are part of this legacy. Thanks again for inviting me. I appreciated being here this evening.
Thank you, Brian.
Just have one last word. We hope we piqued your interest on our local government, and I encourage you to go to the museum, our Elmhurst Historical Museum, and rummage through and look at our history. And if you can't make it there, visit their brand new website, elmhursthistory.org. Thank you for listening to our presentation on Local Government Week.
Alderman Rose.
I want to thank you for that. I want to thank Brian for bringing that. One of the first things I did when I was first elected as alderman in 1991 was to go to the museum, and I looked through that very book, and I read the minutes of every single meeting for the first 10 years of this city, and it was absolutely enlightening. And as a point of interest, the first items of business at the first city council meeting, that first meeting, were sidewalks and building a jail. So I would encourage everyone to look at that, and I want to support Patty Spencer in saying that it really gives you a better perspective on really what your job is as an alderman, and would encourage everyone to look through that. I didn't use white gloves, however, Brian. I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Rose. I might mention, too, that we all received a document here in celebration of Local Government Week. Please enjoy these historic glimpses of Elmhurst government at work. And there are some rather interesting pictures. I doubt if you can see that. You don't have it in front of you, but of early aldermen. This one of the, no, this was city employees, 1929, but there's also a picture of council and old city hall and old municipal garage. So if you have been here a long, long time, you'd have to have been here really long to see, to relate directly to some of the pictures that we were privileged to see. So I thank you very much for your presentations and the pictures that you supplied for us too here to
You're welcome.
get some sense of where we've been. The next item under reports is item B, updates. Does anyone on the dais have an update? Alderman Mulder.
I don't have an update, but I have a request or a recommendation. As we're moving forward and looking at this flooding issue that's occurred in a few locations, just be aware that the 7th Ward has a number of areas as well that we want to make sure are followed up on, to make sure that we catch those areas as we're looking at the other areas. There's a couple of blocks there that have had the same situation for the past 3 or 4 floods.
Very good. Thank you so much for noting that. Anyone else? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Well, I think I'm going to engage in a little Me Too-ism, because I've also gotten phone calls from First Ward residents, notably along West Avenue, and Mr. Borchert and I have been having discussions, but I think it's really important to make everyone aware of how widespread these problems have been in the last couple of years, and that perhaps meeting with these residents who spoke tonight is a great first start, but we're really going to need to tackle this on a much bigger level, since it seems to be hitting across town more than it has in the last few years.
Alderman Rose?
Yeah, all the way from, and the manager mentioned, the 700 block of North Indiana, which is the way northeast corner of this town, to the 7th Ward. I received calls there. I received calls from other people. Some people were so upset they didn't even leave their phone number. They were just very disturbed. So I would say absolutely this is widespread, and I think it's very important for us to take some swift effort in this regard.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I ask a question?
Sir.
I'd like to ask just the city manager, will any of this impact this floodplain study that's going on with DuPage County? The flooding that we are having in the lower sections of Elmhurst. I'm hoping that it doesn't substantiate anything DuPage is doing, so, and rather that, that we're still able to kind of fight them off and basically prevail with our point of view.
Yes, city manager.
Thank you. Alderman Gow. In response to Alderman Sapaniak's question relative to the regulatory floodplain, that matter deals with Salt Creek and overbank flooding, and what we've heard this evening and what many of the elected officials heard from their constituents over this past weekend, and frankly as it relates to the December event and the September event, those were all storm rainfall related events in Elmhurst that caused either street flooding or yard flooding or infiltration and inflow into the sanitary sewer system, resulting in sanitary sewer backups. In that none of those events did Elmhurst experience overbank Salt Creek flooding. So I think we've narrowed the problem down to 3, and Public Works staff, engineering staff will continue to work with the affected addresses as best they're brought to the city's attention. We had a lot of addresses brought to our direct attention on Thursday and Friday. We'll work with those. We've gathered all the addresses today. There's an item under other business that is suggested to be referred to the Public Works Committee. I would suggest that Public Works Director and myself will provide status reports to the Public Works Committee on all of these rainfall-related issues and problems and how they are addressed. And as the Public Works Committee perhaps feels it appropriate, there'll be a committee report to the full City Council. But in that way, we'll keep the council advised, and we will work with the neighborhoods as suggested earlier, and in addition, work with folks that didn't come tonight but have called and expect a city response as well. We will, from a city staff perspective, respond to those folks and keep the Public Works Committee, and through that process, keep the council advised.
Thank you, Tom. I have one request, not an update, but a request for an update. This has to do with an item that I referred basically to Public Affairs and Safety, and I've had calls again recently having to do with AT&T and public access. I'm talking about cable television and the fact that if you switch to AT&T, at least according to a caller this weekend, you still do not have public access. You still will not get the meeting of the City Council. I guess I'm not only asking for an update, but I'm also asking for a kind of clarification here, because you know, for several months now, I don't know exactly when AT&T went into business, was able then to compete and offer an alternative to Comcast. But I know that there have been several months since I first made that request, and I got some feedback, good feedback from Public Affairs and Safety. I wondered first if I could ask again if there's any more news of when we might see that situation change. And I do have a second question that I've actually posed before that always seems to be vague, and that is my understanding, and I raised it before, and I think I got an answer, but is not the contractual agreement, is there not a requirement for them to provide that if they're going to do business in cable television in Elmhurst? Comcast has to do it? I would think they too. So could I ask? Yes.
Yeah, I'll give you a very brief response, and then I'll tell you what we'll do. The committee will take this back up at our next meeting and see if we can get some additional information from AT&T. The AT&T agreement is a state agreement, but it does require them to be at a level playing field. And the initial information we received was that they were hoping to interconnect to Comcast, and Comcast said, no, level playing field, you have to do it yourself. So we have not heard back as far as where AT&T, what the status is, but we'll get a status report for you at our next meeting.
Well, thank you very much. I just really, it just seems to me, if I were in their shoes, if I were, you know, I've moved from one to another, finally competition in Elmhurst, and now I can't even get my city council meetings, for example, or the other candidates who spoke last Sunday. I was not able to be at that meeting, but I was happy to be able to see those presentations this last Sunday, yesterday. And so I was able to appreciate something that I wasn't able to attend at the time. Those who don't have it, don't have the Comcast, don't have that. So
We'll follow up and let you know.
appreciate that very much. Okay. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I just may add a quick comment on that. This is a larger issue than just Elmhurst. And in fact, I should have cut the article, but I just saw an editorial in the Tribune a couple weeks ago about this issue. It was either editorial or an article about this issue. And I'm going to go back and try to dig up that article. So I know other communities have expressed their frustration with this situation as well.
Thanks for that comment.
Just a follow-up. That a lot of that has to do with this state franchise versus local franchise, and that's part of the problem that's occurring. But yeah, we'll get a status report, and it's time to put some pressure on them.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. If there are no further updates or comments, we'll move on to item number 6, ordinances. There's one ordinance here that we need to deal with, 005-2009, an ordinance providing for the issuance of $10 million general obligation bond series 2009 of the City of Elmhurst, DuPage, and Cook Counties, Illinois. Do I have a motion to put this on the floor? Alderman Mulder moves. Second? Alderman Rose seconds. Okay. Comments? City Manager Butchert.
Thank you, Alderman Gao. I'd like to ask City Finance Director Marilyn Gaston and our financial advisor from Spear Financial, Kevin McKenna, maybe to expand on my very preliminary remarks, which are, A, congratulations to the broader City of Elmhurst, to the City Council for your hard work on policies, and to the Finance Committee for their direction, leading to Standard & Poor's evaluation of the City of Elmhurst's ability to pay its obligations, and an incredible, from my perspective, upgrade in financial grading by Standard & Poor's in probably the worst recession since the Depression. Elmhurst has got an upgrade in its bond rating by Standard & Poor's to a very prestigious AA+ rating, which resulted in even more aggressive, it appears, bidding on the city's bonds, resulting in a rather favorable interest rate, which the city will enjoy as it borrows $10 million for necessary infrastructure improvements. In this case, for the Central Business District, it will have a revenue-raising offshoot as a result of the city infrastructure. It looks like Mr. McKenna is going to summarize and report on the bonds which have been bid and the receipt of those, and with your bond approval by ordinance, what happens next. Mr. McKenna.
Good evening. I think passed out was our letter which summarizes the bids. The best bid was FTN Financial Capital Markets out of Memphis, Tennessee. FTN stands for First Tennessee National. So it's one of the banks there. You notice the best bid and the second best bid were both out of Memphis. The best bid was 4.196. The second best bid was 4.197. So incredibly close. We sold this as an internet sale where the bidders got to see where their ranking was. So as in the packet, it shows how many times each bidder bid. And it's on the second page, and the best bidder put in 5 bids because they really, really wanted your bonds. The second best bidder came in 4 times, and the third best bidder, BMO, which is Harris, came in 6 times, trying to win that bid. So it was very, very strong bidding. And as the manager mentioned, as part of this, the city was rated AA+ by Standard & Poor's, and that rating report is part of this packet. And I think it's a very interesting report card because it says, it talks about that in a very difficult economy, the city has good financial practices, a strong economic tax-based growth, strong financial operations, and very strong reserves. And I think a lot of that reflects upon the city's policies and management of the city and the actions that you take in order to get to that point. Certainly in this economy, it is very difficult to get a AA+, and the reserves, which are essentially what you have for a rainy day, and we're in a rainy day situation, were very, very important. It also talks about how the city has very moderate growth, or very moderate debt, and that the debt is paid off fairly rapidly. So overall, it was a very good rating by Standard & Poor's, and I think that the bond issue itself, the 7 bidders came in very strong. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'd recommend that you accept the bid.
I would just wish to comment on the open auction bid process, which Spear Financial, as financial advisor, suggested would be a good tool for the particular application that Elmhurst had for this particular situation. And I think it was an excellent advice on their part that led to, if you see the summary, from the opening bid from FTN to their final bid, they lowered their interest charges by $43,884. So it was I think excellent advising, even more excellent than you normally provide, Mr. McKenna. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Kevin, if I may, how did Standard & Poor's look at the automobile dealerships, which comprise a large percentage of our sales tax? One of the dealerships already went out of business, and given the state of the manufacturers and the fact that they're pulling back dealerships, we have, about a 40% sales tax based on automobiles. How would that be looked upon by Standard & Poor's? Did they look at that in their consideration?
Certainly they took into consideration. They looked at what the percentage sales tax were of your overall budget. They looked at what made up the sales tax payers. But again, the city is very diversified. You have these very large reserves. You have a diversified economy. It's your home rule. You abate all your property taxes for debt service. So you have a lot of strengths. So certainly that was a concern. But I think that they felt that the city has shown that it can overcome that. And I think one of the comments in there had to do with the fact that, as you're going into the budget cycle, they anticipate that you'd end up with a balanced budget. So, yeah, it's a concern, but I think that they felt that you could deal with that.
Can I ask a follow-up? When you said home rule, were you implying that they were looking at the flexibility of the city to raise revenue through taxes or whatnot?
Certainly. I mean, home rule in Illinois is from a rating viewpoint, is a very strong factor. Whether the home rule unit uses the powers or not is something else, but home rule units in general have greater taxing ability, greater fee generating ability than do non-home rule units, which are very much restricted.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Alderman.
Kevin, nice to see you again. Thank you for another $10 million job well done. Quick question. A AA+ for Standard & Poor's, do you know how we stack against competitors, not only in DuPage, but nationally, actually by state and by national rankings?
Well, in Illinois has probably more high-rated communities than most states, in part just because of the wealth of the general Chicago metropolitan region. And then you get into the area itself, and DuPage and Lake have a large number of high-rated, high-ranked ratings. I brought this sheet from Standard & Poor's, and there's about 20 AAAs. And that would include DuPage County itself. It includes Lake County. It includes a number of, a couple school districts, including DuPage Community College is rated AAA. Hinsdale is AAA, and Naperville is AAA. And then the AA's, you get into our, along with the city, Aurora, Buffalo Grove, Clarendon Hills, Downers Grove, Gurnee, Hoffman Estates, Orland Park, Schaumburg, and a number of schools. And then you get into the AA's, where you're going to see more like Carroll Stream, Elgin, Flossmoor, Lombard, Peoria, Roselle, St. Charles, Tinley Park, Vernon Hills, Wheeling. So, but in terms of being, so those are some of the kinds of ratings that are out there, but in terms of the S&P has 200 and some ratings, about 10% of those are AAA, and about 10% of those are AA plus, and then all the rest are much lower, or lower, or much lower.
I think Elmhurst was in that second grouping of S&P communities that you read.
Yeah, so Elmhurst, so Elmhurst is in the AA plus, where there's about 20 total throughout the state, and again, as I said, Illinois does tend to be have higher ratings, in part because of home rule status in Illinois. It's very helpful, and in part because of the economy.
Kevin, I'd like to just follow up on the question. Did we go for Moody's rating too this time?
No, we didn't go with Moody's. Moody's in general was just not being very receptive of the city's qualities. Additionally, if you, Standard & Poor's some time ago came out with the idea that ratings should be fairly universal, in the sense that corporations and municipalities and everybody should be rated on the same basis. Moody's and Fitch, at the end of last year, well, about September, October, said they agreed that because there was a lot of flack at Congress and other places about how the ratings were just seemed rather odd in differentiating municipalities from corporations. So all three rating services basically got to that point. However, Fitch and Moody's in December, I think it was, said because of the economy, they were not going to go to this more general or universal type of rating. Instead, they were going to stay with just municipal ratings as one category. And the main thing that there's a difference on is that municipalities have very, very, very low default risk. Corporations have a much higher default risk, and yet they were treating everybody the same. And so Standard & Poor's acknowledges that municipalities have this very low default risk and tend to reflect that in their ratings and think that that's a much more correct way of looking at things.
Thank you.
Alderman Graham.
Yes, thank you. Listening to your comments in regards to some of the pluses for Elmhurst, of why we do have such a good rating, one of which was already mentioned, home rule. The other comment you made in regards to our large reserves that Elmhurst has. My assumption is that you're referring to the 3 to 4 month operating budget that we have in the general fund. If that is the case, if my assumption is correct, then how is that large compared to other communities? Because we as a council have pretty much agreed that that's our standard operating procedure or our policy. And what really keyed me off, as you said, that was a large reserve. Are you saying it's large in relative to other communities in DuPage?
No, that's Standard & Poor's language, that you have large reserves. Probably most well-rated communities have about a 3-month operating reserve. But many communities don't. I mean, and certainly when you get into more single-purpose governments, the schools, the parks, and the like, you see very, very small reserves. because they just can't afford it. So I think our usual advice is to have a 3-month reserve as a minimum, and for higher rated communities, that's probably closer to the norm.
Thank you. If I may...
Thank you, Alderman Gow. I noticed that our bonds are rated AAA, and yet we have an AA+, so AAA obviously being the higher rating. Is there any reason why our bonds are rated AAA, but we get an AA+, AA+ from Standard & Poor's?
No, your bonds are rated AA+.
It does say here, GO bonds rated AAA.
I'm sorry, what are you reading?
This Elmhurst, Illinois general obligation.
I think that's poor writing in that it says in DuPage County and then parentheses GO bonds rated AAA. They're referring in that case to DuPage County's AAA.
Okay, that's fine.
Oh, yes, that refers to DuPage County. Yeah, that's
it was
the
a little
parenthetical.
unclear.
Yeah, no, that's usually when the rating services quote whether you're in, if they quote that you're in the Chicago metropolitan statistical area, then they'll quote what Chicago is and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other questions for Mr. McKenna? Yes, Tom.
Just an explanation on Alderman Bram's good question about fund balance and the strong rating of S&P to Elmhurst fund balance. They're talking about the capital improvement fund and the general fund together, and Elmhurst has got a very strong capital improvement fund. You put that together with the 3 months, and it's a strong balance.
I have a question. I think it might be for the city attorney, but it relates to this, and maybe Marilyn Gaston. First of all, congratulations to Tom Borchard and staff and Marilyn Gaston. I'm fortunate enough to serve on the Finance Committee with Marilyn, and I don't know of anybody who works harder. So congratulations, because this really, there's very few times where these folks get graded on their work, and when they get a good grade, I think it needs to be recognized. Mr. Kubiza, when we entered into the deal for the parking deck, it was based on an estimation of what our bonds would be, what our GO bonds would be floated at. We put in a loan amount at, I think it was 4.875, is that correct? And our estimate at the time, our bonds would be issued at about 4.5%. So this, I just want everyone to understand that this isn't just a rating that we put on the wall. This actually impacts what happens here in the city. We actually came in with a GO bond interest rate of under 4.2. So all this hard work actually translates into dollars. So it makes the loan of money to the DevCon folks even better for the city of Elmhurst.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that. Thank you. These bonds are going to be issued rather quickly, right?
Yes, the closing will be in a couple weeks.
Okay. So the immediate need for the cash is going to be the $3.5 million we talked about earlier, plus the $1 million for Elmhurst Hospital out of the $10 million bond. And then we recognized 2 weeks ago that DEFCON has until 2013 to start the garage. So therefore, we're going to be paying debt service on these bonds while nothing's changed as far as our position with regard to the garage. Because in theory, they don't have to build it for a few years, and we're going to be paying debt service in the meantime.
I think Marilyn Gaston has comment on this response.
The funds, the proceeds from this bond issue will be used to purchase the property and build the parking deck on First Street, not the one on Addison. There will be another bond issue down the road that will provide funds at such time as we need them to build that parking deck. So the $10 million issue here is $1 million for some obligation for Elmhurst Memorial Hospital infrastructure and $9 million for purchase of the property on First and building of that deck. And that will be happening much sooner than the one on Addison.
So what did the contract say on that one? When's their outside date? I thought it was the same date.
The outside date to build the project on Addison Street is 2013. That's right.
Okay.
No, First Street.
But I don't know, maybe
That's not.
Ken or city manager would know better, but I believe the deck on First Street may be a bit sooner. That property closing is scheduled, I believe, for some time in April.
These are bonds that are not involved with profiting, if you will, on the private side, which go into a different category, which is why they're not being used in a public-private partnership deal. What the city is using in the public-private partnership deal, in the mortgage, if you will, with the Thorne property and the Athar property, are dollars from the Capital Improvement Fund. But that, again, provides an example of the opportunity of using the city's assets, the Capital Improvement Fund, for city projects. The Capital Improvement Fund is financing the First Avenue land acquisition and parking deck project. $10 million go into that Capital Improvement Fund, $9 million for the parking, $1 million for the hospital infrastructure work. That's a fund balance, and the city will draw down on that as it needs to finance those projects. Understanding that the Finance Committee, the City Council, and Finance staff are looking at the Capital Improvement Fund and managing that, along with the Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Fund, which is involved with the Addison Street project, for the assets and the advantages that project brings to the community. So to be clear, this is a $10 million bond issue for the Capital Improvement Fund, and specifically for two projects: the city's infrastructure for the hospital project, and the bulk of it, $9 million, for the First Avenue land acquisition and deck project, which is into preliminary design as we speak. The actual design and construction management contract needs to be brought to the Public Works Committee and to the City Council for approval. We've agreed to agree with DevCom and ARCO in that regard, in that general agreement, but the specific design and construction management contract is yet to be brought to the Public Works Committee.
And I'd also add that we can't use these funds to build the project on Addison. We run afoul of the IRS. We'd be making over 50 basis points on that, and they don't like that, to make money on bond issues. So we can't use that money directly for that purpose.
Right.
Okay. Alderman Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little bit confused, and I'm hoping we can clarify this a little bit more. There's a summary in here in the document we received tonight that's got the cover letter from Mr. McCanna. It's the last section in this, and it states that, if I may quote it, the city will use bond proceeds to build a parking deck and to purchase land for another parking deck. And I just want to make sure, I want to know why that misunderstanding would be in here. Clearly it's incorrect, but where would that have come from? If we're using all $9 million of this for the Larch and First parking deck, and I just want to understand where, how we track that. I'm assuming that there's some accounting procedures that ensure that we're using money from one source for that specific purpose. But clearly, this doesn't mention the hospital, and it mentions these two different parking decks. So I'm wondering why it would do that.
I don't know. I know what we do.
The only comment I can make on that is we have 2 hours with the gentleman from Standard & Poor's, and we throw lots of information at him. He did not come back with any questions for us. we saw this report for the first time today. We don't have an opportunity to look at it, check their numbers, check their information. So they took what their notes were, what they remembered from what we said. We talked about the parking deck that's going on first. We talked about looking down the road, look at the rest of the development in the downtown. We have another parking deck over here. This is the project there. We talked about another bond issue that we may need to float to help pay for construction of that particular second parking deck. So I believe it's just an honest mistake on their part that they just got confused with all the information we were giving them.
So if I may follow up, they're not pulling this from a written source. This is from interviews with you about
Exactly.
the overall.
Right,
plan.
right. No, they saw nothing in writing on that. They haven't looked at it, at contracts or anything of that nature.
Any other comments from the dais? Okay, yes.
I wonder if the city attorney would mind clarifying his last comment about the interest, because one of the discussions we had about the bond and the link it has with what the developer is going to be paying us in interest has to do with what Alderman Morley just said, that we're going to issue bonds at one rate, but we're collecting mortgage interest from the developer at another rate, which is going to help us pay off these bonds. But I'm not sure I understood your complete comment about what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed.
I hear you. It's my understanding from financial advisor that bond proceeds on a not-for-profit governmental entity are limited in the amount of arbitrage, meaning interest earnings capability one can achieve. So there is always a desire to borrow the money and use the money, which is the case with which is the plan. The discussions over on Addison, for the Addison mortgage for the property, there the discussion was really more focused on the interest earnings capability of the city's capital improvement fund, which is more like 2%, versus the interest earnings capability of the mortgage with the private side, where the private side is looking at a 4.875 as a good interest rate for their being able to pay that to have access to those dollars, which is a much higher rate compared to what the city is able to get in its investments. So from a city finance perspective, the city finance team was looking at the interest earnings capability in the capital improvement fund at around 2% versus the interest earnings with a reasonable private side partner where the collateral, if you will, is the land, which the city wished to have anyway, at doubling the interest earnings capability as a good deal. But that's really a separate transaction. The city's borrowing for this $10 million. The money potentially will be dispensed within 12 months of now.
Okay. Seeing no other requests for comment on the dais, I think we are ready to vote. Ready to vote. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
Mulliner.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Regan, absent. Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Gow.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Moriarty.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Sapaniak.
No.
Morley.
Aye.
Plumnicki.
Aye.
12 ayes, 1 nays, 1 absent.
12 ayes, 1 nay. The ordinance passes. The next item of business, I almost want to pause here and say, you know, we in Illinois have had a lot of bad publicity. I wish that some of this information about how many AAAs and AA's and so on are in Illinois and how many we have compared to other states, you know, it'd be nice to have that publicity floating out there as well as some other things having to do with the former governor. Well, anyway, here we go to other business. Item 7, overview of the 2009-2010 budget. City Manager Borchers.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gao. I know the hour is late, and the budget was distributed for the City Council. I wish to just quite generally provide an overview for the council, and understanding that community can't actually look at the budget document. Just refer in a clear fashion, so it is informative also for the community. The city budget will be on the city website tomorrow if it wasn't placed on late today. Late this afternoon, it wasn't yet on the city website in the financial areas of the city's website, but it will be on tomorrow. For the council, I am going to just go through pages 1 through 8, which is the city manager transmittal, and make some comments from margin notes I've made. First of all, I'd like to point out that the city's budget is a 2-year operating budget and includes the first 2 years of the 5-year capital budget. The city staff for you this year provided a first-year budget that is balanced as requested. The second-year out budget is not balanced and is not constrained, but illustrates what would be necessary to provide the more regular level of services the community has expected. So you would have the two side by side. And if you would look quickly to page 86, this tells a lot. It's a graph that identifies the projected general fund balance along with history of the fund balance relative to the budget itself. And it illustrates that for the last 10 years, frankly, with the exception of some one-time occurrences, the city's fund balance has been slowly dropping as a result fundamentally of the sales tax dropping from where it had been in the past. And now in our current fiscal year and projected next fiscal year, we actually go below the upper end of the 3-month. We're projecting in the next fiscal year a contribution to fund balance with the significantly constrained expenditures. And then that steep drop-off, that illustrates a unconstrained or an unfettered budget that would reestablish services. That will need to be dealt with the next city council. Back to page 1, if you will, on the overview. This 8-page summary provides, I think, a pretty quick summary of the 480 pages of the budget book. The last 2 bullets on the first page identify for the council some new components. We are now tracking, as requested, the city's sustainability policy, and will be identifying the goals of carbon emission reduction goals in the future and documenting that in the budget document. In addition, there's a new section identifying major revenue sources and on certain expenditures how they will result in some revenue from those expenditures. On the second page, there is a summary of expenditures. I would wish to emphasize that the general fund expenditures, which are increased in this next fiscal year from 51 million as compared to 48 million, there's $2.5 million in the budget for stimulus dollars, meaning that if the stimulus dollars aren't received, that $2.5 million will not be spent. If you subtract that $2.5 million from the $51.2 million, you can see that the general fund expenditures are pretty flat. On page 3, would emphasize, as stated, there's really 2 controlling strategic factors that drove the staff into preparing this budget. They're the mayor-council message which limits the budget preparation for the next year to existing revenue sources. And then secondly, as a result of the timing of the new revenue in fiscal year 08-09 and as a result of the further deterioration of existing revenue sources 08-09, that drove the fund balance as projected, at least for 08-09, to below the 3-month, 4-month minimum. That leaves then the need to significantly throttle next year's budget. Staff felt there were two major priorities in looking at cost-saving measures. One was maintain the integrity of the infrastructure, and secondly, if at all possible, maintain the city staff at its levels relative to employees at least who wish to continue working in and serving the community. It's my opinion that Elmhurst is not going away. Elmhurst is not getting ready to turn the lights off by any means. Elmhurst has got a short-term issue, need to get through this economy, and coming out of it, the community is going to want the infrastructure maintained to higher levels, going to want the services that it has traditionally expected back on and being provided. And in that regard, the best way to do that is to maintain the integrity of that infrastructure and maintain the staff that delivers those services. You see the listing of the cuts. I would point out there are some one-time things listed here that once done, we can't do them again. We are using the capital improvement program at a above normal rate to maintain the repairs to the street system. That's $500,000 more than was normally taken out. That's to save the general fund. In addition, Mr. McKenna mentioned what I had mentioned earlier, that it's a rainy day relative to accounting, and in that regard, we propose to use the working cash fund. The council identified using $250,000 of it this fiscal year. We propose to use the remaining amount in the rainy day fund next year. That rainy day amount for next year is $700,000. And we're not budgeting for a contingency account as we have in the past. Rather infrequently has the city council used the contingency fund, but it has been there in the past at $90,000. So there's some significant changes from what you've seen in the past. Basically, you page through the next page 4, we're looking at basics, reducing staff as staff leaves, not replacing it, reduced summer staff. Typically, summer staff is a more effective and money-efficient way of getting certain menial labor tasks done, but reducing wherever possible. In IT, with staff vacancies and leaving those vacancies, what's going to be done in IT is really just basics. On the revenues, would just generally state that because of this very difficult economy and the volatile markets that result from that, our revenue projections are softer than what I would suggest they normally are. I think the city finance team does a very good job of estimating, but we're not nearly as confident as in the past. We're projecting that sales tax and income tax isn't going to go up, but we're also projecting it's not going to go down. I'm not sure. It might go down. We just state that this is a budget that's got expenditure estimates and revenue estimates. Our revenue estimates are those two major sources of revenue, sales tax and income tax, are completely flat. Page 6, sales tax. Since the high water mark of sales tax receipts back in fiscal year 1999-2000, many years ago now, sales tax has slipped. It's now $2 million under that high water mark. It was many years ago. I think Alderman Sapaniak has referred to it accurately. There were a lot more car sales, a lot more car leasing going on, and as a result, a lot more benefit of the sales tax roll, which Elmhurst benefits on. Property taxes, would note, and the city abates traditionally all of its general obligation tax levies and is the lowest taxer in DuPage County, above zero. The problems that Elmhurst has with the budget not being balanced to what it otherwise would be is about $4 million. If Elmhurst were, just as an illustration, to increase property taxes to, say, a community like Wheaton, similar size community, similar size consumer of services, rather similar size appetite for quality and for general service, public safety, public works. If that were to happen, Elmhurst's property tax would go from 32nd, one up from the bottom, to 22nd, 11 up from the bottom. Elmhurst would still be in the lower 1/3 of all of the tax rates in all of DuPage County, and the entire budget deficit shortfall this year would go away. So there is a capacity to solve the problem and still be very, very competitive in the DuPage County community. Page 7, I know the Public Works and Buildings Committee is presently looking at rubbish collection fees. Finance Committee will look a little bit later this spring on the water and sewer rates. Parking system, the city budget here does estimate that the $1.50 a day parking is going to go to $2 a day. TIF projects, highlights again from a central business district perspective the rather significant community benefit as a result of the CBD TIF. Over half of the EAV of that area has been released to the other taxing agencies. And in this budget, our expenditures in the area that's left in the CBD TIF designed to create, again, more economic positives in the future. The summary suggests that the budget is balanced as requested. It's throttled, though. There's $4 million not in the budget that would otherwise be in the budget. The reductions are reductions that are judged not to be sustainable reductions without significant readdressing city services, and in that regard would recommend that revenues be evaluated as soon as possible for the next city council as soon as possible in the fiscal year. There are many revenue opportunities: local motor fuel tax, the local gas utilities could be adjusted. There's a water utility tax possible, vehicle sticker rates, stormwater utility, home rule sales tax, and a property tax. So the city does have many tools at its opportunity to utilize. It's just a matter of identifying what it would wish to do, as well as what services it would wish to reduce. What comes next would be your committee of the whole meetings. I would anticipate Mayor Marcucci will chat perhaps with the committee chairman, and our past practice has been to have committees start as early as possible on the committee nights to allow them to finish by 8 o'clock for a committee of the whole meeting on the budget. We've got to review all of these details with the council in that regard, and would remind you that this city council, significant election cycle, needs to approve this budget before the third Monday in April, which is the last regular meeting of this city council. The new city council will be inaugurated on the fourth Monday in April. The first Monday in April is actually the public hearing on the budget. You can approve the budget at any of your March and April regular scheduled council meetings. That's all I wish to say. If any questions, glad to address them, but really don't intend to get into the budget this evening. Just do an overview for you, and we'll dig in next Monday night.
Has this budget, 09, 10, have there been any significant changes to the operating budget, to the 5-year capital expenditure?
There may have been some more accurate numbers, but nothing significant has been changed in that nothing was requested to be changed.
Okay, so we haven't put off an anaerobic digester in...
No, yeah, those items are still in the 5-year capital, and actually the anaerobic digester is in the 09-10 for engineering to proceed on, and there's some thought that should be expedited to allow it to be more shovel-ready, to be more potentially available for no-interest loan from the state or stimulus dollars from the Clean Water Act federal government. So we're preparing from a grants perspective to allow that project to be as advantageous as possible with the changing economic Washington and Illinois EPA situation.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other comments here. We thank you very much for that review, City Manager Borcher. Is there any other business?
Item B.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the updated agenda here, excuse me. Okay. Item B, drainage issues at Cottage Hill and Seminole. Refer to Public Works and Buildings Committee. It's just to be noted. I was going to add one other piece of other business. I will write it up instead rather than taking time at this point to do so, but I would just tell you that it has to do with what I think to be an increase in skunks. And I am going to request that we maybe look outside the box. I know what we typically do. I know we have a limited approach, and I don't think that the police department should spend all their energies on trapping skunks. At the same time, well, I will write up a report on this and ask that it be referred to the appropriate committee. Any other business? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Graham and Elmer, move in second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.